Welcome to Bitcoin Fixes This, where we explore the impact that Bitcoin will have in all aspects of society. Today's guest is Mike Peterson, Bitcoiner, missionary, and resident of Zonte, otherwise known as Bitcoin Beach. We talk about the difference Bitcoin has made in El Salvador, the story of how it all began, and the implications on the Salvadoran identity. We also talk about El Salvador's government, the culture, and the future. Mike Peterson, how's everything going, man?
It's amazing. So glad you finally made it here. What took you so long?
Yeah, so we're, of course, recording from Bitcoin Beach over at the Garten Hotel. I swear, this is like paradise, man. I mean, obviously you've been here a while, but I see why you've been here. This is amazing.
People never believe me when I tell them how nice it is and how much they'll enjoy their time here, but they're always pleasantly surprised. So that's a good thing, I guess.
And it's a beautiful place. The beaches are nice. There's all sorts of surfers around, and the weather is just absolutely perfect. And of course there's lots of good food and stuff like that. So if you haven't been here as a Bitcoiner, I think you need to be. But this episode today is about Bitcoin Beach and what happened and how it came and stuff. So before we get into all that, can you tell my audience, what's your story? How'd you end up here? What brought you to this place, and what was it like when you first got here?
Yeah, I've always loved traveling. I mean, that's been a passion since I was young. After I graduated from university, I spent 6 months traveling around the world. I think we hit up 20 different countries we drove in a car down through Guatemala, an ambulance actually that was donated to some people working in healthcare there. We crossed India, Bangladesh, we're in the north of Russia, down in Africa, Vietnam, and so that kind of made me passionate about travel. Ironically, on that trip, I did not visit El Salvador. I made it to Guatemala, but not quite there. And I think about 20 years ago, a little less than 20 years ago, a buddy of mine wanted to go on a surf trip, and we were just looking around at where the cheapest tickets were, and there happened to be some from El Salvador. We knew there was good waves there, and so we booked a trip, and it was weird because I'd traveled quite a bit, but I'd never been to a place where I felt so comfortable so quickly as El Salvador. I'm sure you've experienced the people here. They're just so incredibly friendly. If you want to interact with them, they're happy to interact with you, and they're very welcoming. But also, if you want to be left alone, they leave you alone. They're not trying to sell you stuff all the time. And so there was something different about this place. And so I called my wife up and said, we have to come back and buy a house. And so literally a month later, we came back and bought a house.
Wow. And what year was that?
That was 2005, I believe.
Okay. And so you buy the house. Okay. What was this place like when you bought it, or on your first trip over to El Salvador?
So at that time, Zonte was just a very sleepy beach town. There were surfers, the kind of more adventurous European or American surfers that were tourists here. There was a lot of people that come out of the capital city of San Salvador on the weekends. That's their place, the beach retreat. But it wasn't really developed. You obviously didn't have places like Garden at that time and high-end accommodations like that. But the neat thing is even as you've seen these bigger resorts and nice upscale places come in, the character of El Zonte has mostly stayed the same. So it really didn't feel that much different.
Well, it's a sleepy town. You don't have the big hotels. What's the community like? What are the people doing, right? Like for work and all that stuff.
So the community really does revolve around tourism. People are caretakers for people's beach homes. They work in the hotels. They work in the local restaurants. There's a little bit of fishing going on. And a lot of people still have cornfields that they grow the majority of their food. They call them milpas here. And they have their bean patch that they sow. That's kind of changed a little bit since when we first bought. You have less people working in agriculture. But in general, most of the people here kind of live hand to mouth, and it's a simple life, but a pretty good life. Okay.
And I noticed that there's been tons of development. So tell me the story of how it's changed since you first bought that house. And did you start living here right away? What happened? What was the story then?
Initially, we would just come down for anywhere from a couple weeks to a few months every year. And about 8 years ago, we really felt like we wanted to make this home. We started getting to know a number of people that were working in local churches or were missionaries here and running children's homes or working with women who've been victims of sex trafficking or working on educational initiatives. And we really wanted to kind of throw our support behind those efforts. And so we started thinking, should we start something here? What can we do? And we really felt led to, instead of trying to start our own thing, to get behind what we already saw happening here and try to support these people and give them the resources, make sure their families were healthy, make sure that those who are experiencing trauma and the work that they do could get counseling and that sort of thing. And so we started a ministry that basically supported the efforts behind the scenes. We have 2 guest homes that these people can use for up to 10 nights a year. We bring counselors down from the U.S. A couple times a year. We do a retreat once a year. And so that was kind of how it all started. And then also as part of that, in the 2 communities where we have the guest homes, we wanted to start doing educational initiatives and, really focus on deterring kids from entering the gangs and from being able to start to dream about building a future in El Salvador and building the Salvadoran dream. And so that was kind of an offshoot of what we were doing.
Okay, well, tell me more about the kids and like these gangs. Obviously El Salvador was known as like the murder capital of the world for a while. What's the story behind that? What was going on? How did these kids join gangs? What was the deal here?
I won't get into the full history, but the quick view is that there was a civil war here in the 80s. And so during that time, a lot of people fled to the U.S. And wound up in rough neighborhoods in places like L.A. And so actually the MS-13 and the 18th Street gang that are famous in El Salvador now actually started in L.A. And then a number of those people were deported back to El Salvador. And it was just at the time that El Salvador had come out of the end of the war. There wasn't really a structure to assimilate these people with this past, criminal activity in their history. And so they brought the gangs back to El Salvador with them. And they kind of exploded in this kind of power vacuum after the war. And so when we initially bought our place, that was still on the uptick. And it seemed like maybe it would start to get under control, but then when the financial crisis hit in 2008, that's when things really started to get bad, because a lot of the opportunities here started to dry up. There's so much of a tie between the U.S. and El Salvador, and so people that were working in the U.S. were sending less money back. The businesses here were suffering, and so you had more and more people entering the gangs, and it really became kind of endemic, where youth saw this as, hey, this is a pathway for me to gain respect. A lot of them, their parents are living in the U.S. working, and so they're with relatives that have a lot on their plate, and so aren't able to really supervise them, and so they felt like the gangs were a family for them. And it was something for them to feel like they were like respected. And so it really became a huge issue with kids as young as 11, 12 entering the gangs. And sadly, oftentimes they were the ones they sent out to, kill people. Wow.
And so there's like gang warfare or something to that effect. Is it just in El Zonte or all over the country? What was the deal at that point?
No, it was definitely all over the country. I mean, El Zonte has been a little bit sheltered from some of that compared to some other places, although we've had our definitely rough patches here. I mean, there was one time during 2016 where there was 3 murders like within 3 weeks. But it's in the last few years, it's like we're living in another world here. Like all that's gone away. There's all this development coming in. There's all this excitement about the future. And so it's hard to believe that it wasn't that long ago that people didn't feel safe here.
Okay, so tell me what happened. So like you're talking about how things sort of changed around 5-6 years ago, 2016-ish. What's the thing that changed, right? Like you have all of this gang activity 2008 to 2016, then something sort of turns around. What was it?
What we saw locally here was some just really promising young men and women in the community start to think about being mentors and start to invest in the youth here. And so specifically Jorge Valenzuela, who's kind of the main thrust behind Bitcoin Beach here on the ground, he had a vision to really start investing in these young kids. He knew their story because his dad was gone for his whole life, basically. His dad went to the U.S., when he was young, and so he grew up without a father. He saw, a lot of his friends join the gangs and lost a lot of his friends. A lot of his friends died along the way. And so he really wanted to see a different vision for the youth here. And because of that, he started coming to us with these different ideas. Like, hey, let's start providing scholarships so kids can go to university. a lot of the kids here don't go to high school because there's not a local high school and there's not a safe way for them to get to high school. Let's see if we can raise funds to buy a vehicle and pay a driver to transport these people back and forth to high school. And so we started, kind of one by one implementing these steps, bringing in English lessons so that people could get better paying jobs. And you could see the kids start, when they saw this opportunity in front of them, instead of just, following their friends in the gangs or thinking, well, I'll just sneak into the U.S. once I turn, 18 and try to get a job there working illegally, they started really getting a vision to build a better El Salvador. And then when Bitcoin came on the scene, it just kind of supercharged that.
Yeah. So tell me more about when Bitcoin came on the scene, because you were obviously part of that. And around what time frame are we talking about? And how far along was this sort of revival and sort of desire to invest in their own community come along and so on?
Yeah, it was probably mid 2019 where this idea to start using Bitcoin came along. We're introduced to somebody who was excited about the work that we wanted to do and was a Bitcoiner from the early days. I think was mining, back early days. And so wanted to use this Bitcoin they had accumulated over the years to really have an impact on the world. But they had a vision that it wouldn't be just the monetary value of it. It would be what Bitcoin can teach you as you start to embrace it and incorporate it in your life. And so that was one of the challenges they came to us with was, we'll support this work you're doing, but you need to show us how you're going to integrate Bitcoin and how you think that's going to impact the lives of the people that are being part of this. And so it took us, a little while to kind of formulate a plan, but in the fall of 2019, we started launching these programs. It was kind of funny. I initially thought, well, because this is money, we should, even though we were pretty youth-focused, we thought, well, we better talk to the parents first and focus on them, because this is money and serious. And we started talking to the, people my age, and their eyes just glassed over, and they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I have no interest. And so we kind of on a whim started using Bitcoin to incentivize the youth in some of the youth programs, specifically collecting trash in the river and some of the other things we were doing. And we saw how quickly they got it, how for them it made sense that you would have a currency that you could use on your phone. And they started actually doing their own research into what gives Bitcoin value. Why does the value go up and down in dollar terms? How is it a money if there's no government behind it? And we realize as people hold Bitcoin, they become much, much, much more likely to do their own research and to want to try to understand it. And so that was eye-opening for us of, hey, we shouldn't spend so much time trying to educate people up front. We need to get them using it first and then bring the education in.
Wow, so they started using it, well, you used it as an incentive for them to pick up trash or whatever, but they then started learning on their own, and then what happened? Did they go tell their friends, or did you get more people involved? What was the sort of next step at Bitcoin Beach?
Yeah, first they started saving for the first time in their life. These are kids who had never had more than a few dollars probably at any time, that accumulated a few $100s in Bitcoin and bought themselves a new phone or helped their family with a medical bill and so they were realizing in the first time the agency that they had in their own life, that they could actually be productive and save and accumulate wealth. They could start businesses. And so it was really it really warped their minds. They were, because in the past they'd always felt they're just destined to follow this same kind of path of just survival. And now they felt wow, I can actually dream. I can think about a better future. And I think I was mentioning to you earlier, we saw this bleed into not just the finances, but actually their view about education. It's always been such a challenge here to encourage the kids to stay in school because they felt why? There's not going to be any better job opportunity. I'm better off just working now and making money than to waste more years in school and wind up in the same kind of menial job. Now they realize that wow, just I don't want to spend my Bitcoin now because I think it's going to be worth more in the future. If I invest in my education now, if I go to high school, if I go on to university, I can actually make a lot more money in my lifetime and actually work in something that I enjoy. And so it was, and I wasn't expecting that at all. I was, it was the last thing I was thinking of. And I wouldn't have predicted it, but we started seeing this, and as we started questioning the kids, they couldn't put their finger on it right away, but we started realizing, wow, no, their mind is actually being altered by using Bitcoin. They're thinking longer term. They're having lower time preference.
So they're starting to have lower time preference, but their parents are still probably not quite involved. So what's changing sort of within the families as the kids are sort of coming home and talking about Bitcoin and all that stuff?
The parents, I think, are more excited than anybody because they're seeing their kids for the first time in their life, like, excited about school. A lot of them are seeing their kids actually be able to help the family out financially. And so instead of the kids asking their mom or dad for money that they don't have, they're actually, hey, I picked up milk on the way home. I picked up tortillas. They have their own money. And I think their parents are kind of blown away that, wow, our kids are interacting in this like international world now. Like they're making connections with people in Europe. They're opening up job opportunities that they can work online and earn a US or European kind of salary without actually having to leave the country. And so with that, you see the parents, start to get really excited. Of course, there's some that don't see it, and there's some that are skeptics, and I'm not saying it's 100%, but you've seen a vast change in just the mentality and the hope for the future. It used to be like, but no, the future is just going to keep getting worse and worse. Now there's this real belief that, no, there's a future in El Salvador, and for a lot of them, they're debating, like, actually, I think there's more of a future in El Salvador than there would be if I go to the U.S. And so you're seeing them kind of wrestle with that and make those decisions to invest in their own country.
And you can kind of see the investment all over. I mean, I was talking to somebody earlier, just even a few years ago, there was just sort of trash everywhere. But now, like, there are these, like, garbage bins with a Bitcoin logo on them, and, like, all the garbage is in there, right? Like, just little things like that. Of course, you got hotels like this, which are sort of like luxury-ish hotels, and you got lots of other hotels. And we were driving through the neighborhood earlier, and you saw like tons of hotels. Many of them are fairly new and stuff like that. There's development activity, civilization building that seems to be happening here. I guess they're being encouraged by that.
Yeah, and it's driving community pride where they want to see the trash being picked up. They want to, they're proud of this place that they live. They're proud to be Salvadoran, and you didn't see that a lot in the past. And so it's really, and I think that is the kind of missing element to development in the world. You see, these big international organizations come in and try to do development in different places, but there's always something missing. And once the money stops flowing in, a lot of times these projects fall apart. But if you can incite that hope and incite those animal spirits in people where they believe there's a better future for themselves, they believe it's worth risking and saving and foregoing current consumption for the benefit of the future, that's how real development happens.
And they're saving, they're planning different things. And I mean, we were talking earlier about like the different types of jobs that they can get. So let's talk about that a little bit. What are the opportunities that they have that are sort of enticing them or giving them hope?
So we're already seeing, and it is definitely early stages, but we're already seeing a number of Bitcoin-related companies come in and start to hire them for customer service type jobs, people that are qualifying customers and verifying ID. We actually have an architect student that's working for a lighting company in the U.S. And helping them put together bids for construction projects, and the reason they were willing to hire them is because it was easy to pay him because they could just send him Bitcoin. And so even though that's not directly Bitcoin related, it's an opportunity that wouldn't be here if Bitcoin wasn't a currency here in El Salvador. And so they're getting in, it is on the bottom rung, but those are the bottom rung to a very promising industry with jobs even on the bottom rung that pay significantly more than what local jobs would pay.
Yeah, and that sort of can bring it back, right? Like after working some of those jobs for a while, they can start their own things over here and see the opportunities and sort of like the demand for different things. I mean, like the fact that you have hotels like this here, like that's a lot of demand, right? Like for real estate or construction and things like that, which, you can definitely do here and make a pretty good amount of money doing if you just sort of know what to do. And they seem to be getting those skills.
Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing some of the younger people here that kind of see that opportunity. They're buying real estate. They're subdividing and selling off lots and, making more in one deal than their parents could make in a couple years. And so, no, we're definitely seeing them catch that vision and realize the opportunity that's here and that they want to make sure that they participate in it. And that's why all the classes and the different things we focus on at Bitcoin Beach, from the computer classes to the marketing classes to the English classes, we're trying to give them those skill sets so that they can be entrepreneurs, they can start their own businesses, they can work for these bigger international companies that pay well, they can work from these Salvadoran startups that we're starting to see, and they can build this future that they're excited about. Because if the development comes and the locals don't participate in it, if they're not the beneficiaries of it, it's really of no value as far as I'm concerned. And so that's what we're really focused on, is making sure that all this new funds that come in, that it really flows into the hands, into the families of the local community here.
And it's definitely doing that. What's absolutely remarkable about like walking up and down Bitcoin Beach is everybody takes Lightning, right? It's like, okay, there was, yesterday we were walking, I think, with the Mexican delegation, right? By the way, there were a bunch of Mexican senators and diplomats that were here to observe what's going on here. And we walked down the street and there was I want to say like a 14-year-old girl on the side of the road making empanadas, right? Like not even using any electricity. She had like a wood-burning, deep-frying oil thing so she could make empanadas. And she took Lightning, right? Like not even electricity. She's like making it on a little table, and she's like, we're like, how much is this? Like it ended up being like $1.50 or something like that. And yeah, she just made it for us, paid in Lightning, and she's able to be an entrepreneur. And we were talking about this earlier, right? Like you were saying how for a lot of El Salvadorians, they're sort of used to sort of a fiat mentality, right? Like you have to stay within the rules and do what people say instead of having that entrepreneurial mentality of, figuring out what the market wants and trying different things and risking things. And that seems to be something of a transition that's happening right now. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, El Salvador has really always been kind of a top-down society. There's, 13 or 14 or however you want to say families here that control the majority of the wealth. And the majority of the people have always basically been, groomed to be employees. And so they're kind of taught rote learning. They're discouraged from a lot of times taking initiative or thinking from themselves. And so you've had that kind of historically, that there was a big separation between the controlling class and the rest of the people. And we're really seeing those walls start to come down now, because Bitcoin really liberates everybody. It gets the gatekeepers out of the way. You don't need a bank account anymore to operate, a small, like the business you were talking about. Without Bitcoin, there's no way that this girl could take electronic payments. Now she can do Lightning payments better than most Bitcoin, or you see at a Bitcoin conference. I mean, she's literally doing them every day. And so it's really had a transformative impact. They just realize, hey, it's a level playing field now. We have the same tools available to us that the big businesses do. And like you were mentioning, just the fact that the Mexican delegation it was here, for people who know anything about Latin American politics, like that says so much, because historically Mexicans have kind of looked down on Central Americans. Like Mexico was the superpower and Central America is kind of the backwaters. But now you have Mexicans like super excited about what's happening in El Salvador. I have a good friend of mine who's from Mexico. He called me up. He's like, man, everybody's so excited that I went to El Salvador. They think El Salvador is like leading the future. And so the fact that even within Latin America, you have other countries here looking to El Salvador as, a leader to follow. I mean, that is shocking. And that brings pride to the Salvadorans and makes them want to stay in El Salvador and invest in their country.
Yeah, and that's very interesting, because there is sort of like this little brother complex that El Salvador's had for a while. Now it's like, okay, there's something to be proud of. And, they seem to I was told at the airport, for example, like, oh, you're into Bitcoin. Yeah, I think you're going to really enjoy your stay. Like, they're almost treating Bitcoiners a little differently. Is that right? Or what's going on?
If you're a Bitcoiner, you're a VIP. It's the opposite of how it is in most of the world. I mean, some countries you're afraid to tell them you're into Bitcoin because they'll think, oh, you're a drug dealer or a money launderer. Here you say, I'm here for Bitcoin. I mean, they'll roll out the red carpet. I mean, they really want Bitcoiners in El Salvador.
Yeah, and, I have met a lot of Bitcoiners in the past, but like in the past couple of days, I've only been here a couple of days. Yeah, I've met so many people from other places that I know from Bitcoin, and it's like, oh, you're here too? Like, what's going on? Like, there seems to be a significant number of people that are coming here for the fact that it's Bitcoin Beach.
I mean, it's kind of like being at Miami during the Bitcoin conference. You're at a restaurant, and you see other Bitcoiners. That's how it is in El Zonte all the time. Like, there's just continual people coming here, and Bitcoiners now view it as a place they need to make a pilgrimage to. And then once they visit, they don't want to leave. And so they're buying properties here, they're starting businesses here. And I really think 10 years from now, this will be the hub of the Bitcoin world. Like when you want to do a podcast, you will meet up in El Zonte. If you want to have a business meeting, you will meet up in El Zonte. I mean, I think that's the direction we're going.
I mean, it's certainly true. I didn't even know Max and Stacy were here until like maybe a couple days before. I'm like, are you in El Salvador? They're like, yeah, are you coming? I'm like, I'm gonna stay at the Garden Hotel. Oh, that's where we are. It's been absolutely like amazing just being here and like seeing all the Bitcoiners, and I mean, it's also super beautiful. I can't go on about like how beautiful this beach is and how like wonderful the sunset is and how relaxing this place is. It's almost like I have to like slow down and like relax to like match the vibe of this place. But oh man, like, so tell me more about the other people from Latin American countries and what they're doing here, because it does seem like not just like people from Mexico, but you're getting people from Guatemala and Nicaragua and I don't know the other neighbors.
A lot of Brazilians are coming in, a lot of Venezuelans. Yeah. No, I mean, people see this as like, this is the hub. This is where you need to be. And so it's fun because if you would have told somebody that a few years ago about El Salvador, they just would have laughed at you. And now it's the place to be seen. They want to have their picture taken in El Salvador. They want to have people know that their company is a part of what's happening in El Salvador. And so that's just remarkable. What
companies are getting involved here? Because I know there's, obviously we had La BitConf, and I think you had your conference here as well. So, like, who's coming here, and what are they doing? How are they helping the local population and so on?
I mean, it's been across the board, and I don't know who's publicly with their stuff and not, but like the folks from Bitso are here like on a continuous basis. Obviously, Athena, Strike, Galloy Money, which has really been the muscle behind the Bitcoin Beach wallet and a lot of stuff that's happened here. I know there's another, I think it's Chain Bytes is another Bitcoin ATM company that's here. There's, I can't remember all of them in front of me, but all I know is I get like a continued list of messages from people like, hey, we're coming into the country. Who would you recommend as a lawyer to set up our legal structure? Oh, wow. Do you know how it works for the immigration? Everybody wants to know when are they going to release the regulations to get the, whether it's a permanent visa or a passport, hopefully, in El Salvador. And so I really feel like we're at just the very bleeding edge of the first wave, but I think we're going to have subsequent waves of investment and interest that come in once the bond deal gets released, once these other things happen. I think it's just going to be nonstop. Okay, all right. So let's talk about the political environment, because you had this Bitcoin Beach thing going before Nayib Bukele started, becoming a Bitcoin maximalist, basically. What happened? Like, how did it go from here to suddenly becoming sort of a national thing? Because it's a small community. We were in San Salvador earlier today, and that's a much bigger city. It's like an hour away. It's like a sleepy beach town for surfing. Somehow it's now like it went from a sleepy beach town to the entire country. What happened? I think a huge part of it was when Peter McCormick came right after La BitConf in 2019, and he was the first one that kind of put us on the map in the Bitcoin world. And I think from that, there was a writer for Forbes that heard that podcast. And so she did an article and Forbes, and it was a very positive article about what was happening in El Salvador. And I think that was literally like the first time there'd been a positive article about El Salvador in like a mainstream publication like Forbes. And so I think the government officials here took notice of, wait, what's going on here? Like, we're being talked about in Forbes, and not because of gangs and murder rates, but because of financial innovation using Bitcoin. And so after that article, we started really reaching out to the different government ministers here. All the projects we do are social projects. We're focused on education and those sorts of things. And so we started reaching out to like the Minister of Tourism, Morena. She's amazing, forward-looking. She has a real heart and vision for seeing this country be transformed. And so she would agree to take meetings with us, and we'd start to explain to her, hey, these are the projects we're doing in El Zonte, but it goes way beyond this. If we can get El Salvador to adopt Bitcoin as an official currency, you will see a huge influx of Bitcoin tourists that will just want to come here and spend Bitcoin. They'll literally come here, want to buy properties, want to buy second homes, want to buy stuff that they don't even necessarily need, and they'll just give it away, but they want to be able to spend Bitcoin. And so, and you'll see this huge influx of people who financially have resources behind them. And so you'll bring in this whole new class of tourists, but also because of the changes that we're seeing in the workforce and the ability for people to work remotely, you have this whole new huge market of people who are not locked to their desk, and they don't want to live in San Francisco anymore. They want to go somewhere where they can go on the beach in the morning and go surfing in 80-degree water. They don't want to live in New York City in the winter. They want a place where they can go where they don't have to shovel snow every morning. And now they have the freedom to do that because they can work remotely. And so El Salvador is in the same time zone as the U.S. It's a short flight. They use both Bitcoin and the dollar. So whatever world you want to live in, you can live in that. And so it's a very convenient place for these people that are looking to escape and have a second home that they can spend months every year in. And so we started pushing these things on the different ministers, the Minister of the Economy, kind of the same thing. And we also really pushed on them. You could literally change the narrative about El Salvador overnight if you guys adopt Bitcoin. Like, there's nothing else you could do. I mean, you couldn't pay a publicity firm $1 billion and get the kind of good publicity that you could get from making this one choice that's going to benefit your people in all these other ways. But it will bring investment. It'll bring businesses that want to locate here. There's really no downside to it. You'll have this whole narrative change and this energy that comes with it. And so I think the first time we tell them that, they're like, yeah. But then they see the Forbes article. Then they see Bloomberg do a piece. Then they see something else. Then they come back and want more information. And so we kept pressing on them. This is a way to change how the world views El Salvador. And quite frankly, we also said, hey, this is a way for the president to cement his place in history. Like, if he wants to go down in history books, this is the way to do it.
And he listened, right? Like, so what was that like when he announced that, Bitcoin would be legal tender in El Salvador? That must have been at least a little bit of a surprise for you. I think you were in Miami at the time.
I was in Miami. I started hearing rumors a few weeks before. I knew there was something going on with Strike because they wouldn't return my calls because I knew I was going to ask them questions that they weren't allowed to answer. And so I knew there was something going on, but I really thought it would be a much smaller step. I didn't realize they were going to go all in to that level. I thought maybe they'd start accepting it for taxes or something like that. So when they announced what they were actually doing, and I realized how huge and all-encompassing it was, it really took a couple weeks for it to really settle in. It felt like every morning I wake up and I'm like, wait, did I dream that, or did that really happen?
Yeah, and of course he made that announcement. He got it through Congress, and now it's legal tender here. They, rolled out the Chivo wallet and everything else. So what's that been like? The rollout and sort of like adoption of Bitcoin? Is it smooth? Is it rough? What's going on here?
It's rough and messy. I mean, anything you're going to roll out in 3 months is going to be rough and messy. I don't care how you slice it. There's definitely been challenges within the Chivo wallet. I honestly told people, no, there's no way it's going to work on the launch date. It's the people I talked to in the tech space said, no, there's no way they can do it. They somehow had something out that kind of worked. So I give them props for that. I think now they've made a lot of updates, and I'm hearing, encouraging things. There's still a long way to go, but, look how long it took the U.S. government, with, I don't know, hundreds of millions or billions of dollars they spent on the U.S. healthcare thing, and I still don't think the system really works. And that was a smaller endeavor. So I think we have to be realistic that these things take some time. But I think all of the other benefits that came with it, the investment, the change in narrative, the excitement, and of people thinking that El Salvador's leading the way instead of falling behind, that's actually all been much more palatable than I had assumed it would be. I thought it would take more time for businesses to warm up to El Salvador. I thought it would be a couple years before they were starting to knock on the door. But I mean, they were literally, like, when the law was announced, I talked to people who said they were flying to, from Saudi Arabia to Mexico on vacation, and they changed their flight at their connection and flew to El Salvador instead because they wanted to see what was going on here. I mean, there was literally plane loads of people that started coming in, and it hasn't stopped. I mean, the conference that we had in November, I mean, I'm not 100% on this, but I think those are the biggest international conferences that El Salvador's ever had. And those people, probably 90% of them couldn't have pointed out El Salvador on a map like a year and a half ago. And now they were there at the conference, spending money in the country, setting up businesses in the country, hiring remote employees in the country. And I didn't meet a single person who said, "Oh, I was disappointed in El Salvador." Or, "Yeah, it was okay, but I don't think I'll come back." Everybody said, "Oh, I don't want to leave. I'm already booking my next trip."
Yeah, and I mean, that's why Max and Stacey are still here, right? Like, they came in November and they liked it so much, they're back. And of course, there's like that volcano bond that's going on and all sorts of things. So let's dig into the weeds a little bit, because the politics here are very interesting. You had the Civil War, and then like 92, there's this stuff going on, and you had like traditional parties. From what I understand, Nayib Bukele and his colleagues, or the members of his party in Congress, are a very different breed than the people that were in power before. Can you talk about that a little bit and what the politics around here are like?
Well, first of all, they get things done, so that makes them very different. The politics here were similar to the U.S. You had your right wing, your left wing, and they kind of traded power back and forth, and it really didn't matter who was in power. They looted the country. I mean, I think the name's blanking on me right now, but the one who fled to Nicaragua, it's alleged that he left here literally with trash bags full of $100 bills when he fled to Nicaragua when they were trying to arrest him for looting the country. So that was the history. Of the past four presidents, three of them were indicted for stealing millions of dollars. The last one probably will be at some point. I mean, it just seems to be the history. And so that was the sense here, was you got into political power in order to enrich yourself. And Nayib is kind of shaking that up, in that I really don't think that he's after money. I don't think that this is trying to grab power in order to get money. I think he really wants to build a legacy here and wants to go down in the history books. Now, that doesn't automatically mean that it's going to go well. There's lots of people that want to go down the history books that wind up being very bad. But I really think that the motivation here is to transform El Salvador and to make it a place that can lead the world forward.
Yeah, and his party seems very different than the others in the sense that it's mostly younger people, and from what I hear, he seems to appoint people that are extremely bright and competent rather than sort of like people that have been around a while and express loyalty or something like that. Can you talk a little bit more about like how they've been governing here?
Yeah, I think the majority of these people have never worked in government before. I mean, they're people that came out of the private sector. And honestly, some of the brightest people I've ever... Usually when you meet government officials... You know how it is.
Yeah.
But here you're actually like shocked, like, wow, these people are actually thinking about all these things. They want to push these things forward, and they're open to suggestions. They're not, they don't have all these, interests that they have to that they owe to. They're able to actually be forward thinking and do what's best for the country, not what's best for the people who have, backed them for 20 years, their party. And so because of that, they're very pragmatic. They're not ideologically driven. I think the only ideology that's kind of driving things is like, let's make things happen, let's shake things up, let's transform this country for the benefit of the people.
And they are certainly transforming the country. I want to shift gears just a little bit because, you and I are both Christian. Like, we went to church this morning and everything else. And you've been here sort of as a missionary for a long time. What has the church's response been to all of this Bitcoin stuff? Because, I imagine for them, perhaps being a little more conservative, maybe they'd be a little more resistant to it. What's been the reaction?
Yeah, surprisingly, we have had some resistance, specifically from the church in the early days. There was rumors started that Bitcoin is it's what's referred to in the Bible as the number of the beast, and it's connected to these things, and so we just had to spend some more time kind of educating them and helping them understand how really the Bible is about justice, and in order for there to be justice, there has to be just money. And actually, we use your book a lot, illustrations from that, of helping explain to them, why Bitcoin is a Christian concern, why we should be pushing this, and why bringing just money into the world reflects God's heart. And so it takes a little bit of time because it's a very new thing to them, and I think a lot of times people are suspect of anything new, and there's been a lot of scams that have been connected to Bitcoin. They're not really have anything to do with Bitcoin, but they use Bitcoin to rob people of things, and so people hear things like that, or that it's linked to drugs and those sorts of things. So it just takes a little time and education.
Yeah, but we were talking earlier about this. Their attitudes are largely changed by what they're seeing in their kids. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, I think for any parent, when you see your kids all of a sudden like wanting to go to school, thinking about the future, talking about going to university, getting a job where they're earning more money than their parents a lot of time, them watching their kids be able to do like remote transactions that they can send money from their home to the local pupuseria, little restaurant, and have food delivered. Like, that's like shocking to these people. They feel like they're living in the movies they see in the U.S. where people order these type of things and send money from their phone. And so them seeing the opportunities that come to their kids in these things, and how, wow, there really is a better future here in El Salvador, they quickly overcome their concerns. Of course, there's still some skeptics. There's still people that think it's a scam. There's still people against Bitcoin. But I think the more time goes on, the less you're going to see that.
And that's because of all the good things that Bitcoin is bringing to this community, including the development that we're seeing around us, and all of the, all the kids that have like different attitudes, and all the people that seem to be finding opportunity and so on.
Yeah, I mean, and like we talked about earlier today, the new housing opportunities that are coming here that we're doing with New Story, that these people that have been squatting and living in dangerous conditions are going to have the chance to buy a home that they can actually afford to make the payments in, and they'll be able to make them in Bitcoin, so it'll be easy. So you're seeing, they're realizing, like, none of these things would have been happening if Bitcoin hadn't come into the country.
Yeah, and they're going to pay their mortgages in Bitcoin, right? Like, that to me is like absolutely astounding, because from what the News Story guys told me, they, if they wanted a mortgage, they had to like walk an hour to a bank and, go pay the mortgage and then come back. It's like, they're not going to go do that. Like, that's just completely unrealistic. But they can pay in Bitcoin, they can use the couple of hours that they would walk back and forth to work, and then use that money towards, paying the mortgage or something like that. So that seems to be what, and all of the development that's going on. And guys, like, if you come here, you can see the development happening, right? Like, there's new construction all over the place. It's not like cranes in a city or anything like that, but you see cement blocks all over the place. You see, the iron rods, I forget what they're called, but
the rebar.
Yeah, the rebar, like, I guess they don't construct with wood here because it rots or something like that. But really kind of crazy, the amount of building that's going on.
Coming out of the COVID shutdown, we had an employment program here because we really wanted to make sure we didn't lose the momentum we had. We didn't want people to, drop into despair and go back into drinking or things like that. Things that the positive momentum we saw, we didn't want to lose it. And so we were actually paying people to do different construction projects, road repair, that sort of thing. Like, we don't need to do that anymore. Like, now, even the existing projects we're doing, we're challenged to find employees to like move in those space, because there's so much natural development happening here. And so we see this happening in like a positive way. Not like in the U.S. where people don't want to work because the government's paying them to stay home. Here, like, everybody's working now. And I've been here for 18, 19 years, and I've never seen it like that. So it brings a new hope to people. And when they see foreigners coming in here to a country that has often been, spoken of very derogatively, and foreigners like excited to be here and want to build homes here, it makes them start to realize, wow, I'm lucky to live here. Like, these other people are actually trying to figure out how to get a Salvadoran passport. I have a Salvadoran passport. I can build a future here. And that didn't exist a few years ago.
Yeah, I never thought about like the impact on the local community when you're, like when other people desire it. It's almost like a human instinct, right? Like, oh, wait, other people want it, then maybe I should want it too. It's kind of a strange, weird dynamic there.
It's just human nature. I mean, we're all wired like that. You always appreciate something more when other people like appreciate it also.
And there's so much to appreciate. This beach is amazing. I remember sitting yesterday at a restaurant and I just talked for 2 hours. It was just so beautiful. The sun was going down over the water, and you see people surfing and playing on the beach, and you have a nice drink, and you're with other Bitcoiners and talking. It's like, wow, I couldn't get any work done, by the way.
That is literally the only complaint I hear from people, is they say it's hard to get work done because I want to go surfing, I want to go running on the beach, I want to enjoy the sunset. There's so much beautiful stuff to do that you feel guilty if you're sitting in your room at your keyboard.
Well, and you got Bitcoiners to talk to, so it's like, what am I going to do? Am I going to ignore the Bitcoiners? And there's so many of them. All right, so tell me more about Hope House, because I think that is a remarkable story and what you guys are building there.
So Hope House was really the vision of Jorge Valenzuela, to there be a center, kind of a beacon of hope within this community that could be the center for all of these programs that are building into the youth. And so it's a physical location, but it's also a movement. Obviously we have the offices there. We have downstairs, basically set up as a big classroom. So that's where we do some of the English classes, although we've outgrown those. So we've moved a lot of those to the school, but we do a lot of the computer classes there, the marketing classes, those sorts of things. And then upstairs, we actually have a remote work center where these people that start to get jobs with international companies can work in a professional environment. I mean, you went in there, I'm assuming there yesterday. I mean, it got nice hardwood everywhere, beautiful. I mean, it looks like one of the nicest offices you'd go in anywhere.
And you're building more.
Yeah.
It looks awesome.
And it gives these youth this inspiration because they are in the classes downstairs and they realize if they can kind of continue with those and persevere, that they can wind up upstairs making good money, working in interesting jobs, leading the country forward. And so they really have this visual all before them of what is possible. And that's changing their mindset and how they feel about living in El Salvador.
Yeah. So what's funding all of this? Like obviously it takes a lot of money to do Hope House. Are you taking donations? What's going on?
Yeah, almost all donation funded. I mean, we did build a guest house. I think you saw that's almost ready. So we're going to start renting that out to Bitcoiners to bring in some kind of more secure monthly income. But yeah, we have Bitcoiners who have generously donated, have come down and seen what was happening here. We had the initial donor who has really done the lion's share of stuff, somebody who was in the space early, benefited from it, and really wanted to not change their life, didn't want Lambos or anything like that, but wanted to just improve the world. And so, yeah, we've been very blessed, and God has been very faithful to just keep providing. And as opportunities come in, the funds come in to take advantage of those. And even more than the money has been just the amazing way that God has provided the local talent and people like Jorge, like Roman, like Irvin, these young leaders that really have a vision. And I mean, they have tons of opportunities now. There's tons of companies that want them to come work for them, do these different things, but they want to work in the community. And so they're making much less than they could be because they want to continue to focus and building into the work that's going on here. And so, yeah, I just feel blessed to be a part of it in a small way.
Yeah, and it's, not a small way. I think you've done quite a bit here. But yeah, this whole place you could kind of see it changing, right? We were talking about they're tearing up a lot of stuff because they're installing sewer lines and they're, paving roads in various places, and there's it's amazing. I feel like I'm at a place where civilization is actually being built, and that's always been sort of for me the point of Bitcoin, is that if you have a solid base layer of civilization, then people are incentivized to build. And there's nothing that quite captures that like El Zonte does.
No, it's being done in a way that's benefiting the locals. That's what's so exciting to see. You see development happen in a lot of places where it actually pushes the locals out, but that's why we're so excited about this project with New Story. I mean, we're talking 500 plus homes that are going to come in, that the local families will have deeds, titles, be able to build generational wealth. We're working on another housing development specifically targeted towards the Bitcoin community that's going to sell luxury homes, $200,000 to $1 million for people that want a second home in El Zonte. We're actually working right now with some people on a proposal to build the first wave park in Central America in El Zonte and bring some more of the tourism more inland. And so build like a wave park surrounded by a full-on residential development with hundreds of housing units. And so, and that's just what we're involved in. There's all these other people that have other projects that, are on the table. And so, I think people are gonna, tell their grandkids about how it was growing up in El Salvador, and their kids and their grandkids won't believe them because of the opportunity and prosperity that will be here, in 10, 20, 30 years from now.
Yeah. So how are sort of like the communities around El Zonte sort of reacting? Are they taking on more of the Bitcoin stuff? Or are they developing too? What's going on around? Because you're talking about this wave park that's more inland, and that's something that you guys are pursuing. Obviously, there's stuff going on in San Salvador. But what's the rest of like this community or the greater community? What's that like?
Yeah, El Zonte has really become an engine for growth in this region. So even Chutipan, which is like the department head of this region, it's like where the mayor's office is. It is the bigger city. It's actually like becoming secondary to El Zonte, and the mayor's looking to El Zonte as helping drive the whole region. So we're seeing development happen in neighboring cities, and kind of like throwing a pebble in a pond and you have that ripple that goes out. That's what we're seeing as this Bitcoin development comes in, as people want to be a part of this, and they come to El Zonte and realize, well, property prices are already getting pretty high here. Maybe I'll go into the neighboring town and get ahead of this. And so we're seeing this spread out, and we're seeing the prosperity and opportunity spread out to the region.
And just like a quick thing about the COVID restrictions, I haven't really seen any. And, there was kind of a funny story involving the conference that was here in November. What happened? How did the COVID restrictions stop here?
My theory, I can't say this, I don't have this on official word, but I really think it was Bitcoin that fixed that, because there was all these people coming in for the conference, and some of them were having challenges if their flights were delayed, then their tests weren't valid anymore. And so the government overnight just unilaterally sent out a tweet and said, okay, we're getting rid of all COVID restrictions immediately. Anybody can enter in. You don't need a test. You don't need to be vaccinated. And so I think because they are embracing freedom, they're embracing the opportunity that Bitcoin brings, they're also realizing, like, yes, we need to be responsible, but we need to be really thinking about how we implement things. And so let's focus on the health of our people. I don't know if you saw the video that the government put out here, but
yeah, man, it was exercise and stuff like that. Yeah,
I mean, literally the most sensible thing any government has put out. Like, hey, get sunshine, get exercise, eat healthy, don't eat bad, and live your life. Like, we need to go on. And so I think it really is Bitcoin that has driven a lot of that, kind of drive towards freedom that we're seeing from the government. I think they've really internalized it, and I think they've been impacted by the Bitcoiners that they're interacting with.
And they seem to continue to, I don't know, like become almost like better rulers as a result. Or am I wrong? Like they're, I don't know, listening to their people. They seem to, all the incentives seem aligned. I don't know. Is that an accurate description of what's happening?
I mean, even the pastor of the church, I was talking to them, he runs a children's home, and he was telling me, he's like, we've met with the government recently. He's been here for, I think, 20 years. He's like, I've never had them actually listen to me before, but they're listening to us about how to implement different regulations when it comes to children that are orphans or that are in the system. And they're actually implementing common sense things. He was shocked. He was like, I never would have thought. And he hasn't historically been like a raving fan of this administration by any means. And so for him to be saying those things that like, yeah, no, we see good things coming out of here. And I hear that from everybody. I mean, I don't know how many Bitcoiners I've had come. I mean, people from big companies say, I've never had a government like welcome me in like that. Take the time, ask us what our needs are, listen to our concerns, ask us for advice on how to write regulations. And so I literally have not heard a negative thing from anybody who has interacted with the government here from the Bitcoin community.
And that's absolutely remarkable because it's a sharp contrast to pretty much most other governments.
Well, and Bitcoiners are not ones to, pull any punches. Like, they are very biting with their words, and if they don't like something, they're going to tell you up front. So the fact that they have all had positive responses, I think has been pretty remarkable.
And that's really kind of crazy to me that like a government can be that like sort of responsive, but in a sense they're sort of married to Bitcoin at this point, aren't they?
They're pot committed. I mean, they are all in. Like, they have put all their chips in on this. And so, yeah, they need to see it work. And I think they really believe that it is good for so many different reasons. And they are pro-business, but also like pro-not interest business. Pro-business is actually going to bring benefit to the local people. And so even for us in this real estate projects that we're working on, I mean, we have like a government liaison who's like, hey, I'm assigned to you guys to make sure that there's no hurdles in your way. Like, usually you bring stuff to a government, they look for every reason to say no. Like here, they want to say yes, and they're like, hey, we're on the same team. We want to make this happen.
And you can kind of see it, right? Like some of the public works that are going on, the El Zonte in particular, I think you told me that it used to be all dirt roads. There's, some paved roads coming in, the sewer system's being installed. So, people are getting like cleaner things, and, there's more housing, obviously, more jobs, more everything. And the government's actually helping. Wow, what a concept.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a skeptic always, but I'm always like pleasantly surprised. Like, wow, I just assumed it would not be like this, but I'm always positively surprised.
Yeah, and that's absolutely remarkable. So how do you see this like sort of going forward? What's this place going to be like in 5 years as, all of this sort of continues to develop? What do you see for this community and El Salvador in general?
I see specifically for El Zonte, it really becoming a intellectual hub for the Bitcoin space. I see it not necessarily as a place where people are going to put their business headquarters, but where the business owners are going to want to have their beach house. They're going to want to hang out with other Bitcoiners. And I'm going to see the local people continue to become coders, to continue to move into the Bitcoin space, to be working in remote jobs. For the country as a whole, I see a real move of capital. It'll primarily probably go into the capital city initially as people set up their company headquarters, but then as projects like Bitcoin City actually start to gain momentum, I think it's going to branch out throughout the whole country. But I don't think it's going to be limited just to Bitcoin or even just to tech or finance. I think this new image for the country, the excitement, the animal spirits that it's woken up within the local people of like, hey, I'm no longer focused on leaving here and going to the U.S. Now I'm focused on building a business here. I mean, I get messages all the time from Salvadorans who say, hey, I've been in the U.S. for 20 years. I'm here illegally. I've actually built a successful business or life for myself. But I think I want to come back to El Salvador now. Like, I think there's more opportunity in El Salvador. And so I think we're going to see that continue to play out. And really once these bonds roll out and people see the amount of focus and people with serious wealth that believe in El Salvador, I think that's going to be a wake-up call for really the whole world. The IMF, the elite leaders in El Salvador, and the U.S. government, quite frankly.
And other countries that will be seeing it and saying, how do we get some of this? Right? Like,
we're already seeing that. I mean, why do you think the Mexican delegation is here right now? Why are all these Brazilians here? You see people looking to El Salvador as like, hey, this is a way out of this kind of dead-end road that we've been in with the IMF and this continue being debtors to them. Like, we can actually be part of a financial system that is flattening the playing field. It's leveling opportunities for everybody, and where we're no longer second fiddle to the world powers. Like, we can actually pursue our own destiny, and they can not be, subjugated to the wishes of other people.
Yeah, it feels like the birth of a real like city-state almost that's not under the control of some sort of U.S. or regional hegemony of some kind. Like, it really feels like the birth of something new.
100%. And I get a lot of flack from people that, there's still lots of problems or this and that. Of course, these things don't happen overnight. But I think historically, you'll look back in 10 years and say, it was obvious. Where now there's a lot of people that are still doubters that this is actually going to be something that is really going to transform the country.
Yeah, and there is sort of like an energy here that is very different. And like, even the way people are perceiving themselves, and in a generation, I imagine that'll be very prominent in the young people as they come of age, or as El Salvadorians come back and invest back into their country instead of just sort of letting the money leave into the US and so on. It really does feel very different. Like there's a new system almost of sort of like international being that's being explored here.
I really had it kind of put to me in a real succinct way by, did you meet Harrison at the Human Rights Foundation conference? Were you there this year?
Yeah,
I can't remember. Okay.
I was, yeah.
Did you meet Harrison?
I don't remember if I...
He was at the dinner that we were at.
Okay.
And so he was Salvadoran that was, when he was really young, left here from El Salvador, grew up in the U.S., and he was sharing with me how he was always kind of embarrassed to be from El Salvador. Like it was seen as this country that always just had problems and nothing good going for it. And he was saying like what a difference it's made in his own life to like see this transformation. Now he wants to come back here. He sees the hope and the potential here, and he sees that in other Salvadorans that are living in the U.S. Like it's transformative, and I think people underestimate how important that psychological and emotional component is in development. Countries that have nothing going for them, natural resource-wise, finance-wise, when they get that belief that they can build something, they can be transformed overnight. I mean, you saw that in Singapore and the transformation that happened there. That was a backwater.
Or
nobody thought
South
that
Korea.
could happen. Or South Korea.
Yeah.
And you see the difference that makes when that spark is kind of lights that flame. And so I think we're seeing that in El Salvador, and I think that's going to spread to the rest of Latin America.
Is it the fault of fiat money to like douse that flame everywhere? Is that what's happening? Is that what you're telling me?
I think that impedes it for sure.
Yeah.
I think that even in El Salvador, look, like you have the U.S. government just printing more and more money, devaluing the wealth of the people here. Like, why is that fair? How is that fair? And these people are locked in that system. But now they're not anymore. Now they can embrace Bitcoin. Now they have a way out.
And they're certainly taking that and like sort of running with it. It really is interesting how it like changes the mentality. And that's not something a lot of people in the U.S. really appreciate, is sort of like the mentality in growing up in sort of like a third world country or something like that, is you kind of feel like a second world citizen from the beginning. And, this is sort of like taking them a step up. And it's like, okay, I'm El Salvadorian. This is something that I can be proud of. And we are doing something different. We are our own people, and we have something that we can contribute to the world. And that to me is super exciting, because that's where real innovation happens, and real entrepreneurship happens, and real good stuff happens.
I think you hit the nail on the head, because I think as Americans, we always grew up believing we could do anything. We could be president, we could do all these things. Most people don't grow up with that. And it is self-defeating. Like they feel like they can't dream, so they don't dream, and they wind up exactly there, not doing anything with their life. Now here, they've been unleashed. They feel like they can dream, they can do all these things. And so I feel like you're seeing what you would have saw in the U.S. decades ago when we had that kind of more hope for the future. You're seeing that in El Salvador now, as you're seeing that kind of sink in the U.S.
Is that a spiritual revival, you think?
I think there's a component to it for sure. Yeah. And obviously, as a Christian, I believe that Bitcoin is an important tool, but obviously I believe that way more important is eternity and how we are living our lives out. And so I don't want to overplay the role I think Bitcoin plays. Bitcoin adoption is not the end goal. Bitcoin adoption is a tool to help bring justice into the world, the justice that I think God desires.
Well, this hour went by really quick, but where can people find you? Where can people learn about, what's going on here in Bitcoin Beach?
They can find me here in El Zonte, so I hop on a plane, but also I'm behind the Bitcoin Beach handle on Twitter, and so I try to be active there. And I love when people are able to make it down to El Salvador and see El Salvador for themselves.
And we are at the Garten Hotel, who's, been generous enough to let me record their podcast in the hallway. So they do take Bitcoin if you want to book the hotel, which is what I did, which it's kind of awesome. And the owner's real cool, and he like goes surfing every day and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a real nice place to be. I highly recommend it. They'll pick you up from the airport. You don't have to worry about anything.
There'll be other Bitcoiners here for sure, because I think it is the favorite of Bitcoiners, because Bo was one of the first adopters. He's a believer in Bitcoin, and like, he accommodated. Didn't he buy you a bunch of tomahawk steaks when you came in to make sure you had all your meat needs?
He went to Nicaragua, or he sourced the tomahawks from Nicaragua or something to make sure that they were ready for my arrival. Good guy. So I want to give him some props. Really nice hotel too, and beautiful. I think it's like booked out for a solid amount of time, but if you could book it or something like that, highly recommend it. Absolutely gorgeous, very relaxing, gorgeous rooms too. So yeah, just wanted to give them a shout out because they've been nice to me. So, especially with the tomahawk steak. So anyway, it was great talking to you, man, and yeah. Hopefully we can do another episode in a few years, and we can talk about all the additional development that El Zonte has.
We may have to make it before a few years, because I think there's going to be a lot happening even in the next year. So.
All right. Well, that's awesome. Unchained Capital is a sponsor of this podcast. I'm an advisor to the company. I know the team well, and I'm excited for what they are building. If you need multi-sig, collaborative custody, or a Bitcoin native financial services partner, learn more at unchained.com. Well, that wraps it up for this episode of Bitcoin Fixes This. Mike Peterson can be found on Twitter at BitcoinBeach. Until next time, fiat delenda est.